A great honor for me to introduce our keynote speaker this evening, a man certainly whose performances on film and television have meant a great deal to me and to many others. Mr. Alan Arkin has long been recognized as an actor of great talent and versatility on stage, screen, and television. Mr. Arkin's first part on Broadway was the lead in Carl Reiner's play Enter Laughing, for which he won a Tony Award. His first feature film, The Russians Are Coming, The Russians Are Coming, won him a Golden Globe Award for Best Actor, as well as an Oscar nomination. He received a second Oscar nomination and the New York Critics Award for his performance in The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. A second New York Critics Award followed his role in Hearts of the West. Other film credits include Wait Until Dark, Poppy, Catch-22, Little Murders, The Last of the Red Hot Lovers, Freebie and the Bean, The 7% Solution, The In-Laws, Simon, Choo Choo and the Philly Flash, Improper Channels, which won him the Canadian Genie Award, and Joshua Then and Now, which won him a second Genie. Besides acting, Mr. Arkin has directed several projects, received an Oscar nomination for Best Short Subject for his film People Soup. When not occupied as an actor or director, Mr. Arkin is likely to devote his time to music or writing. He has written 4 books, all published by Harper & Row. Mr. Arkin also has a number of credits as a director, including work on Broadway and off-Broadway, in feature films, and in television. Please join with me in welcoming Mr. Alan Arkin. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What a lovely setting, a beautiful campus. In this particular setting, I think I won't be totally satisfied with the evening until we get a couple of dozen spontaneous healings by the end of it. Either that or somebody's got to do a rendition of Oklahoma. I never made a speech in my life until about 1.5 years ago. I was approached by Jim Germanic at ICM, International Creative Management, a big international talent organization, and he said to me, Alan, when you're not working, how would you like to go around the country and make speeches? I said, no, not a chance. And I said, I hate listening to them and I hate making them. I said, but what I will do is I'll go and I'll have a dialogue with people. I'll stand there and wait until somebody asks me a question and I'll answer the question. That way I can defend myself. I never said a thing like that, I can say. And so he said, okay, he settled for that, and he sent me around to high schools and small colleges, and I'd go and talk to a couple of dozen people in the drama department, and maybe sometimes as much as 100 and 150, and we'd have this very nice dialogue, and I enjoyed it a lot. And then about 1.5 years ago, he sent me to Wright State University, which isn't far from here, and I thought it would be the same kind of experience, and I opened the door when it was a basketball stadium, and there were thousands of people in there. I said, my God, I can't just start with questions and answers. I better make some introductory remarks at least. So I started talking. I looked down at my watch, and it was 1 hour and 20 minutes later, and I hadn't noticed the time go by, so I made a speech. And let me tell you, I was very impressed with myself. The only thing I can really call myself is an actor. I've done a lot of other things, but they all happened to me. I don't know how or why they happened. I'm delighted that they did. I'm delighted that I found ways of leaving myself open enough so that these other things presented themselves to me and that I said yes. But the only thing I feel really qualified to talk about is acting, because it's the only thing I never decided to do. It was never a decision. It was something that I had to do from the time I was 5 years old. And I'm going to have to, in order to get to what I want to talk about, which is not myself, I don't enjoy talking about myself particularly, but in order to get to what I want to talk about, which is why do we do these things? Why do we need to create something? What is it about us that makes it necessary to raise our voices about ourselves or about the condition of man either as an actor or as an artist or a musician or what have you. I want to get into that. But in order to do that, I have to go back to my roots a little bit and tell you how I got to be whatever it is I am. I don't know anymore particularly what I am, but whatever it is I am, and for whatever reason I was called here to be here and you there, this is the thing, these are the things that started it. My father tells me that when I was 5, I came to him and asked him if he could keep a secret, and he said yes. And I said, well, I'm going to be an actor when I grow up. And he said, fine, and he thought I'd grow out of it like kids do. They change their mind a million times, and I never did. Which caused him a certain amount of consternation because he wanted to be a painter and he didn't have any luck doing it. He was a brilliant painter when he was younger and a brilliant poet. Had he been left, well, I can't say left to his own devices because what he ended up, he decided upon in some way or another, I believe. But had he left himself alone, let us say, I think he could have been a world-class poet. The things I read of his when he was in his teens were brilliant, brilliant works of poetry. And he had a certain amount of trepidation about my going into the arts because he knew he didn't succeed as an artist. So he kept his mouth closed and waited to see what was going to happen. Well, it was not only that I decided at 5 that I was going to be an actor, but I became an actor at 5. I don't mean necessarily professionally. I didn't become an actor professionally until I was in my late 20s. But inside, I became an actor. I remember when I was 6 or 7 years old, listening to a conversation between my mother and a friend of hers, and listening to the woman complaining bitterly about her life. It was a kind of an unhappy life she led, a husband who hated her and their children who didn't like her. And she was sobbing about this. And I remember sitting there, I think I was about 7, and saying, I'm not moved by this. So she's not moving me. I said, why is she not moving me? Why don't I care? And I said, because she's feeling so sorry for herself that she's not leaving any room for me to feel sorry for. And I even at that age, I was taking life and using it as food for acting. Acting, even at that age, I mean, it happens to a lot of actors, if not most of them, sooner or later. A lot of the good ones and a lot of the great ones. Life becomes food for their art. Now this had happened to me already at the age of 7. I remember going to a film at the same age, 7, maybe I was 8, maybe 8 and a half. And I remember watching the film and not being terribly interested in it. I had an amazing capacity to get totally lost in film, in literature, in novels, in comic books, in music. Not in life so much, but in any of the arts, I could get totally lost. I got lost in movies more than I got lost in anything. And I remember sitting in a movie and not being captivated by it. And I found myself just idly picking up my hand and going like that, and pretending I was watching the event through a keyhole. Now, up to this moment, everything I had watched in any film I had seen was absolutely real. I didn't question it. It was reality, it was geniuses, it was experts, it was people who knew what they were doing. It was an event that I had no say in. It was more important than I was. I did that, I pretended I was looking through a keyhole, and all of a sudden, there were certain performances that became false. I said, now why is that? And I did it again. I took my hand away and I went back to the old way of looking at it. I was watching film. I was watching something expensive and important and very big. And then I did it again. I looked through the keyhole again and I saw half of what I was witnessing become lies in front of my face. Because by using the device of pretending I was watching this through a keyhole, I had turned it into reality. I had turned this edifice of money and size and color into simple reality, and I could see that certain of the people in front of me were posturizing. Other of the people were performing for me, and I said, how can they be performing for me? They don't know I'm here. I said, there's nobody here in this, on the other side of this door, in this keyhole. How can they? And I immediately developed an ethos, an ethic of what good acting was, which remained with me for a long time. It didn't change for a long time. And so much so that I became enormously dogmatic and rigid about what a good acting had to be. I studied, I acted, I dragged my mother to acting schools from the time I was 6 or 7. I used to drag, the opposite of being a stage mother, she couldn't have cared less, but I dragged her bodily to acting classes, made her sit there and watch, and she took quiet pride in what I was doing, but didn't really care that I became an actor. I got leads in school plays in junior high and high school, and oddly enough, I was miserable after every performance. Miserable. I got all the laughs I wanted. I felt like I had a wonderful ability to control the audience. I say wonderful euphemistically. I'm not so sure how great a talent that is in the long run, but I could do it. I had a terrific ability to control an audience, make them laugh when I wanted to get their attention when I wanted to divert it to another actor when I felt like it, to turn something serious when I wanted to. I'd get off stage and I would be miserable every performance, sulk and moan and go up on the top of the hill in this little place near Los Angeles where we lived and just sit there for hours and hate myself. And I didn't know why. I didn't know why. And then in college, I studied at Los Angeles City. Meanwhile, I've been getting scholarships to a lot of theaters around LA. And I'd commute from my junior high or my high school, sometimes 2 hours, a 2-hour drive, a 2-hour trolley ride from my school to a school in Hollywood where I got a scholarship, a 2-hour ride back, studying for 3 hours. So I was working sometimes 15, 16 hours a day, including what little time I spent with my schoolwork, but I had to show up anyway. And it was enormous. It was not only serious to me and important, it was literally life and death. I mean, I used to think that if I wasn't going to be an actor, I would kill myself, that there was no point in living, there was nothing else to be. And yet, throughout it, I was miserable after every performance. Miserable, abject and unhappy, and I didn't know why. I didn't know what it was. I thought I was crazy. My friends thought I was crazy because I was already getting some kind of attention in little theaters and in the high school I was in, the junior high, and the places I'd gotten scholarships to. I said, well, I got to have something because I'm getting these scholarships. I keep getting leads and things. And then I went into college and I studied at Los Angeles City College, where the department was as if it had come from the 18th century. The department in theater was so archaic that even as untutored as I was, I knew that there was something terribly wrong. I mean, they had rules there, like if you do this, it means you're stupid, and if you do this, it means you're a thinker. If you know anything about human psychology at all, you know that's a lie. That people don't work that way. If you stand with your legs far apart, it means you're gross. You're refined if you stand with your legs together. I said, there's something wrong with this. And I had an instinct from watching people and imitating them all my youth that the most wonderful thing about people is the fact that they're always a surprise. The minute you pigeonhole somebody into something, they jump out and poke out at you from some other place. And that was the constant delight to me and something I tried to incorporate in my work even then. Miserable, miserable. I quit the department and became an English major. And then I got a scholarship again with a man in Los Angeles whose name was Benjamin Zemak, who had been a student of Stanislavski. Now, if you know anything about Stanislavski, you know that he was the founder of what is called the method. Now, people say that Marlon Brando is the person who exemplifies the method in this country. It's not true. He exemplifies Lee Strasberg's version of the method, which was very different from Stanislavski's method. Stanislavski himself was a stickler for voice and posture and movement and conveying ideas to an audience. And Lee Strasberg was interested in angst and pain and exposing yourself and terror, being in terror of him was another important part of, very important part of his teaching. And I felt that there was, even then, I felt there was something wrong with that. It seemed to me that the best work I knew, not only in acting, but in music and in painting, came out of some kind of joy. At least it looked like it came out of some kind of joy. And I wanted that. I didn't know how to attain it. So I started to study with this man named Benjamin Zemak. And I play a scene, trying to get the kind of attention and accolades that I usually did. And he'd stop me in the middle of it and he'd say, "What are you doing?" I said, "What do you mean I'm doing?" "Well, I'm playing the scene, I'm acting." He said, "No," he says, "I know you're acting." He says, "But what are you doing?" You as the character, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm saying these lines. I'm standing here and I'm saying these lines. As interestingly as I know how to do. And he'd shake his head. And I didn't know what he was saying. Months I went there, and I felt that there was something in his mind that he was not terribly good with language, as is true of a lot of... You want to hold it down, please? What is that, a train? Please hold it down. Thank you. And it's Lee Strasberg's people, I think. Finally, he got the message across to me that it wasn't enough to be interesting, that I had to be doing something on stage. He said, where are you coming from? I said, what do you mean? I'm coming from in the wings. He said, I'm not talking about you. He says, you're no longer you. You are the character. I'm talking to the character. Where's the character coming from? And I said, I see what you mean. The character had to have been, and up to that point, I'd be off stage with actors, and I'd see them having to make an entrance and do something like this. To let you know that he was there. And I thought, well, that's pretty good, but there's something missing. And then I started realizing that what he was asking me to do was the thing that I had been missing all my life, 15 years of I was 20, but I'd been studying inside myself for 15 years. He was asking me to become the character, not to play the character, not to demonstrate the character, not to demonstrate how talented I was or how interesting or captivating I was, but to just simply be the character. And that meant being where the character was when I was off stage, being where the character was when I was on stage, relating to the other people as if I was the character, as if they really meant something to me as the character, understanding the background of my character's life, understanding the background of the other people's life on stage. And it was a complete and total revelation to me. And I said to myself, of course, this is the work that I loved, even from the time when I was looking at the stage through a keyhole. These are the performances I liked, and this is why I liked them. They had a life independent of themselves. It's Sandy Meisner's group. They had a life independent of themselves as actors, and they became the characters. And I'd always loved this. And I said, for God's sakes, why didn't I ever try this myself? Well, I didn't have the tools to do it. I didn't have the mechanism. You had to have a set of tools in order to be able to do that, and I never had those set of tools. So I worked, and I worked, and I worked, and I did backgrounds on characters, and I'd make myself freezing. If I had to come up 5 flights of stairs, I'd run up 5 flights of stairs and get out stage like this. I'd have to talk, and sometimes I couldn't speak. I couldn't get dialogue out because I'd be so exhausted from climbing the flights of stairs. And I still wasn't getting his sympathy. I wasn't getting his accolades. And I knew, at that point that he wanted me to be the kind of actor that I wanted to be. And I could see this by analyzing the criticism around me. I could see when he criticized somebody around me, their work get better. And not only get better, but get better in the way that I wanted my work to get better. That's how you tell a good teacher. I think not just as an actor, but in any way. Is he transforming the people around you into what you want to be? Is he saying the things of their work that you want your work to be? It's not enough that he's smart. It's not enough that he or she is smart. It's not enough that they're learned. It's not enough that they're intimidating, which often gets a lot of people into not only acting schools, but any kind of school, because they're intimidated. It's, are they projecting a philosophy that you want to become part of? You want to be that philosophy. And I don't mean think it. I don't mean feel it. I mean be it. Because ultimately, when you adopt a philosophy, it's of no use to you unless you become that philosophy. Not think about it, but be it. And since I thought of myself in those days only as an actor, not as a human being, being a human being was of no interest to me. It was something I had to go through in order to act. I had a lot of problems. People talked to me about it. I said, yeah, when I'll become a successful actor, it'll take care of itself. I slaved, I knocked my brains out to the detriment of my schoolwork, to the detriment of my life at home, to try and assimilate what he was telling me. And then one day, I guess, maybe it was about a year after I started studying with him, I became the character on stage. It was at a final dress rehearsal of a play in which I played, so I was maybe 19 at the time. I was playing somebody in their late 30s. Can you hear me okay in the back? Is it good? I was playing somebody in their late 30s with a couple of kids and a wife, and I walked onto that stage and I was no longer pretending anything. I was the person. As an actor, it was the first time in 15 years of thinking and studying and experimenting and playing parts, it was the first time that I didn't any longer make any decisions. It was as if I was above myself somewhere, watching an event take place in front of me. And this person up there was saying, yeah, go, it's going great, it's going. And the person down there who was letting it happen was saying to that person, don't bother me, I haven't got time, I don't have time for that. It was like a split thing. And I could not make a mistake. There was no way in the world I could make a mistake. And I came off after this long scene, which must have been 20, 25 minutes, and I didn't need any, and I just looked over at my teacher like this. And he looked back to me the same way, and I knew that for the first moment of my life, I was really acting. And it was what I was waiting for. And it was maybe the first moment of pure joy I'd ever known. I heard Louis Anderson on an interview. You know Louis Anderson, the comedian, the big comedian? I heard him on an interview I've never been an enormous fan of his. I find him charming, but I've never been a great fan. He described an event, his first success, which was on the Johnny Carson show. And he described exactly the same thing that I just described, except he called it an out-of-body experience. He talked about the sense of split and something happening that he had absolutely no control of. He talked about it as if it was an out-of-body experience. I don't know whether it is or not. It kind of, in retrospect, it felt like it might have been. I have no way of knowing. All I know was that I lost total control of everything I was doing, and in doing so, gained or allowed a control to take place within me that was more intelligent than anything I had ever experienced before. It made decisions for me that I was incapable of making. It made the decisions of a man 20 years older than I was. It made the decisions of a husband, of a father. It did things from an instinct that I knew nothing about. But when I came out of the experience, they were mine. They were mine, and I was able to hang on to them. From this moment on, if I thought I'd liked acting before and wanted to be an actor before, now I was impossible, because I had experienced something that felt miraculous to me, and I didn't discuss it with anybody because I didn't know how to discuss it. But it put acting on a pedestal for me now that turned it into something that was for the gods, that belonged to only people that were godlike and were approaching this incredible state. I said, I'd meet somebody at a party or at school or at a gathering, and I said, oh, what do you do? They said, oh, I'm a rocket scientist. I said, oh, the poor guy, he could be, the man could be an actor. He could be an actor. I'm a brain surgeon. Oh, what a shame. I'm an astrophysicist. Oh, isn't it? And I didn't say, I would say, oh, they're wonderful. But inside I would be crying for these poor people who are not able to do what I was able to do, to transform myself, not pretend for other people that I was transforming myself into somebody else, but to really transform myself into other people. And I was such a fanatic that I put myself in this state where I could do it on a fairly regular basis. Now, this went on for quite some time. I came to New York, and I got connected with Second City. I was with the first company of Second City, which achieved a lot of prominence. And I got to New York, we went on to Broadway. I did 2 starring roles on Broadway, and this was happening throughout that entire experience. In the meantime, I got married and had a couple of kids, and started recognizing that all these things that I put off, things like life, relating, just simple relating to people, sharing something with people. I was the cliche of all the actors that ever were. Guy, I mean, that's the old joke about what an actor is like. Say, guy was talking to his friend endlessly about a performance he did in a play, and he finally says, in an embarrassed tone of voice, he says, oh my God. He says, enough about me, tell me. He says, what did you think of my performance? Well, I had become that cliche. And actors are very often that cliche. They go, oh, isn't that interesting? Oh, wonderful. Oh, yeah. Oh, that. Oh. But they're not listening to a word you say. The epitome of this was a dear lady, a wonderful actress, and a good friend of mine. I told her a piece of devastating news one day, and she went, oh my God. Can you see the look on my face? She said, and I said, oh God. She's watching herself, and she's filing away that expression to use in a performance sometime. She's only peripherally paying attention to my tragedy here. We all, in every profession, tend to take on the coloration of that profession, one way or another. Shoemakers go down this, they go to a party, they're looking at your feet. You see it happen. Everybody does it. Actors tend to be selfish people. They tend to be caught up in how interesting their own emotional life is. And another problem they tend to share is that since theater, since the dawn of time, is about crises, is about the crisis of somebody's life, actors like to live in crises. That's why they're always late for class. Oh my God, I'm late for class. There's some acting students here. I can't see anybody. So how many acting students here? Hello? Oh, so you know what I'm talking about. So you start manufacturing crises to help yourself in your art, to make yourself more creative. Well, somewhere, I don't know where, it was partly maybe some innate sense of something better, something more important, and partly 2 people in 1 week telling me I should go to a psychiatrist, 2 close friends, sent me to a psychiatrist, and I started recognizing that there was more to life than what went up on stage. Because here I was very successful. I was getting 1 million offers on stage and starting to get them in movies, and I was abjectly unhappy. I was miserably unhappy, except for when I was on stage. When I was on stage, everything was great because I had this ability to transform myself into other people, whoever they happen to be. An axe murderer, great, it's not me, anybody but me. Hitler, terrific, it's not me, I'll be a good Hitler. I'll have more fun playing Hitler than I will playing me. When I got off stage, you could have hung me up in a closet. I was useless to anybody or anything. And somewhere I recognized that I had to be useful to something other than the stage. That in order for the stage to ultimately be the kind of stage I wanted it to be, and I wanted myself to associate with, because I had what I consider, everybody thinks they have good taste, but I wanted a kind of theater that I thought most people didn't care about. Because I remembered when I was young being dragged to foreign films, French films, German films, Russian films, Italian films, films about Eskimos. And I used to think for a long time that films, you had to read movies, because my father took me to so many foreign films. I thought that you had to constantly be going like that. A good film was a foreign film, I thought, but you have to look at it vertically. But I learned things about the human condition. I come away from movies reeling with feelings about people that maybe I hadn't had feelings for before. I come away with wisdom about other cultures. I come away about a sense of maybe how to be heroic in an event that I never thought myself capable. But this character would operate in a way that I felt, yeah, maybe I can reach for that. Maybe that's something I can do. And that was my idea of what the kind of theater I wanted to be involved in. It was what my feeling of what theater could be. A theater that can change people's lives. I didn't want to entertain anybody. I was never interested in entertainment. I felt it was a lie. I felt it was a waste of time. I felt it was a way of avoiding something. In that, I feel like I discounted to a certain extent the emotion joy. Not entirely. I felt like a lot of what I decried, it was wise to decry. Things like a lot of the early MGM musicals, where I'd sit there like this through the whole show, hey, it's great, it's great, and then I'd walk out and I'd hate my life. I'd hate life. And somewhere I was smart enough to say, there's something wrong with this. This is not a good movie. This movie is telling, this in my teens, this movie is telling me something that is not good food. It's not good food here. A movie, in order to be valuable, in order to serve, everything's got to serve. In order for that movie to serve, it's got to somehow make me feel like I want to live in this world, not in some technicolor fantasy life. That's like an actor. I mean, it's like a little joke of somebody who doesn't know what to do with their lives. They're miserably unhappy, and they go to see the movie Gandhi, and coming out with this great elated sense of, yes, I know what I have to become an actor. If that's what the movie Gandhi has done for you, then you haven't seen the movie Gandhi. To me, Gandhi was a great movie and a great performance, because it really got underneath the skin of one of the great men of our time, which is hard to do. Almost nobody has ever been able to play a man like that with any kind of sense that there was flesh and blood there. They go around with their eyes up in the sky a lot, and I somehow say, I don't think that's what it was. But he did his homework in a very profound and down-to-earth way. So I wanted theater to be right. I wanted it to be beautiful. I wanted it to be served. I wanted it to be a place to teach people. And I felt that my life was drying up and incomplete. And I didn't have any stream any longer that was feeding my work. And if my own life forces are not being fed by anything, are not being fed by anything other than acting, then there's something terribly wrong. So I started by going into analysis, which allowed me the luxury, finally, of starting to listen to other people. Part of why I didn't listen to other people was because I was an actor, and part of it was because I had parents that talked to me in stereo, so I shut up. I learned how to not listen to anybody, because it was the only way I could hang on to my sanity. My parents talked 24 hours a day simultaneously, and I stopped listening. So my doctor said to me, I'd be in there and I'd be going like this, and then we'd be talking, and he'd say, did you hear me? I said, sure, yeah, I heard it. And after about 6 months, he said to me, what did I just say? And I said, what is your... And I couldn't repeat what he had just said. And I was nodding my head and making noises in all the right places. And I said, God, I'm a cripple. There's something wrong with me. And I started to force myself to listen to other people. Started to force myself at first, and then I started to find out some people had interesting things to say. And even people that weren't actors. And I started talking to some of these people that before I had felt sorry for. I started talking to a writer. I'd have an in-depth conversation with a writer and find that he had had the same experience that I did. That he had the experience, maybe not every day. I didn't have them every day either. But he had the experience when he had devoted himself to a piece and suffered with it and struggled with it and chewed on it and worried it and really devoted himself to it. He had the experience of having the work take over and having himself watch his hand writing and not know what was coming out. And when he got through reading 5, 10, maybe 15 pages of stuff that spewed out of him, he would learn things from what he had written, things that he didn't know he knew, things that he swore afterwards that he didn't know. That he put himself into a place, some people would call it a trance. I vehemently don't call it a trance state. He put himself into a state where he was acting perfectly past any ability of himself to control. Then I would talk to a musician, and I'd find that musicians, really good musicians, have the same experience. They'll sometimes have it in that way, and they'll sometimes have it in another way. They'll sometimes have it where they find themselves merging with the other musicians they're playing with, which I've had that. I've been in a couple of singing groups. I've had that experience once or twice in singing groups, and it's a miraculous and exquisite experience where you merge with the other people and the music starts playing you. I've seen it happen on stage once. I directed a production of Joan of Lorraine by Maxwell Anderson, which was a play I was in love with. My wife Barbara, who's here tonight, played the lead in it brilliantly. And I'm a tough director. I have made enormous demands on my actors. And on the third night of this particular production, 16 people in the cast, I watched the play start, and in the first 30 seconds, something was taking place that I hadn't directed. And I got a little bit paranoid. I said, what is going on here? And I watched actor after actor come on and do the play and do something other than what we had planned. And then I started getting very paranoid. And I said, was there some kind of mutiny here? Was there some kind of meeting held and they decided they didn't like my... And then I relaxed enough in the next 15 minutes or so to get a sense that something not only different was happening, but something magnificent. Something that not only did I have no control over, but that the actors, none of the actors had any control over either. And I usually go backstage in intermission. I'm blessed in that actors, when I'm directing, don't want me to disappear as a director. It makes me enormously happy that they seem to enjoy my presence hanging around the backstage. So I do that. I didn't dare go backstage in this production. And I went backstage afterwards, after watching an event that I had never seen before, that I had no part in. And I found the actors, all 16 of them, on the stage in a circle, just beaming at each other. And I stood there with them, just in silence for 5 minutes, unable to speak. And we just hugged each other as a group and then went about our business. It never happened again in that or any other play I've ever done, but it was something I'll never forget as long as I live. And that was that same kind of thing. And then I found more and more and more, and the more and more people I talked to, that happens with everybody who is devoted to something. Who is devoted to something initially maybe at the exclusion of everything else. It'll happen in a craft, it'll happen in a profession, it can happen when you feel an extraordinary way about another person. It can happen to a doctor, it can happen to a salesman. I mean, I know doctors to whom this has happened to, who will get an instinct about what's wrong with somebody past all of their book knowledge, past all of what the symptoms are telling them. You have all had this experience. Most of us like to dismiss it. It's frightening. It reminds me of a statement I heard last year. I forget from who. Somebody talking about people who have experienced the miraculous, of which I think this is a small part, saying that there was a poll that he took personally. I think it was Ram Dass, Richard Alpert, who said that he took a poll of people who had experienced samadhi or the miraculous or some kind of spiritual epiphany, and said that 90% of, everyone polled said it was the most extraordinary thing that ever happened to them in their lives, and 90% of them said they never wanted it to ever happen again. It's terrifying. It's terrifying. It's putting yourself out on a limb to an enormous degree. It feels, in a sense, like you're doing something criminal. But it only comes at specific times to people who have honed their craft. And when I say craft, I don't mean necessarily an art form. Living can be a craft too. When you are deeply in love with another human being, that is also honing your craft. Love is a craft. You often experience, people experience these, mothers experience this kind of thing with their children. It comes out of deep devotion. The mistake, this was something that I came to way later. The mistake we all make, all of us who are caught up and tied to and in love with these crafts and think that these are our salvation, because these are the places where we find ourselves and thereby lose ourselves and lose ourselves and thereby find ourselves. The mistake we make, and this was the thing that got me out of any profound interest any longer in the craft of acting. Oddly enough, not to my detriment. I would have thought it would have been, but it turned out not to be. And I still feel like it is to my detriment, but other people who I trust tell me it's not, and I must trust them. Ooh, that was a long sentence. The mistake we all make, all of us who have these crafts or professions or things that we love dearly because we have this sense of losing ourselves in, the mistake I made, and I think most of us make the same mistake. If you want to, it's a high-level mistake, is that we think that the craft did that for us. The mistake I made was to say, acting is God. Acting is like God. Acting is the greatest thing on the face of the earth because it is that thing in which allows me to lose myself. It's that thing which allows me to totally lose myself and get absorbed in something bigger and better than I am. Now, what I didn't realize, and this is oddly enough a very humble mistake, and it's the mistake we all make, is to say, acting didn't do that for me. There was nothing innate in acting that did that for me. I brought that to acting. That state exists in me. Acting is nothing. There is no such thing as acting. Acting is what each of us here feel and think it is, no more or less. There is no edifice that we can call acting. There is nothing that the members of the academy have in common with each other, except just the fact that they are members of that academy. If you get a description in the heart of hearts of what each of these people think acting is, you'll get 100 different descriptions, hundreds of different descriptions, hundreds of different personal needs, hundreds of different ideas of what can be gotten out of it. I brought that to acting. So what I finally realized was that that thing that I felt God was perfection, that I thought acting gave to me as a great gift, therefore I had to bow down in front of acting, was in me. And that the way to straighten out my existence, the way to heal myself, to become a person, was to acknowledge that if I start treating life the way I treat my craft, even a little bit, I'll start learning how to live as I did that. Now, I've never met anybody who has had this kind of experience that I talked about, this transforming experience, that hadn't spent years and years honing their craft, doing scale studies. Like a pianist instinctively knows, well, there's an early stage where pianists, you go crazy and you think you're a genius because you're cutting loose. And then when nobody listens and people leave the room, you say, hey, wait a minute, maybe I need to study for 20 years instead of this. Then you sit down and you study scales endlessly, and you hone your craft. And then at the end of 20 years, you say to yourself, with a voice that you know to be true, I cannot bear this any longer, and you go back to what you did initially that you thought was, whoa, only this time it's genius. This time you come around that arc, that 180-degree arc, and it's genius, and that nobody leaves the room and everybody sits there like that. And you know that you have, yes, let yourself go, but let yourself go into this field that knows more than you know. This field. I don't know what it is. I don't have a name for it. My assumption is a lot of people think I'm talking about God. Maybe I am. I don't know. I would be nice if that was true. I would like it if it was true. I don't know. A doctor will only have it with extraordinary devotion to his craft, to one of these doctors that gets up in the middle of the night still to go see a patient. And there are still doctors that do that, who deeply care about this particular person. They'll find themselves knowing things. Teachers, parents, husbands, wives, they know this. So I started trying to see what would happen through a lot of help, I must admit, enormous amount of help from my beloved wife and children and great teachers. Started to try to do scale studies in life to see if such a thing could also happen in one's life. If you did those scale studies, to my great, extraordinary joy and elation and excitement, I find that it's the same thing happens in life as can happen in a craft. And that's basically what I came here to talk to you about. I'll tell you, one of the first things that happened to me, which was very interesting and very funny and kind of exciting in this regard, was I've always loved tennis. Loved tennis. Never been a very good player. I started too late. I didn't start till I was about 35. That's pretty late to start. Yeah, particularly when now they got people winning the Grand Slam at the age of 6. Well, 16, I guess. And it always deeply frustrated me to lose, and I was very competitive and terribly groused and complained when I didn't win or play well. And I played a lot with a dear friend of mine who'd been a tennis pro when he was younger. And he not only enjoyed playing with me, but enjoyed killing me. He wasn't one of, really nice people will play a little bit better than you so that you learn, but he wouldn't do it. Slicing and cutting and destroying me. 6-love, 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 goodbye. Next week, 6-love, 6-love, and it was humiliating and I felt terrible, and I just forced myself to play with him because I felt it was some kind of challenge. I don't know. And then finally one day, after starting to think in these terms and started to think about spending time, before I finish this, let me talk about what happens on stage a little bit when that epiphanal moment takes place. That epiphanal moment when that sense of split occurs and you're acting perfectly takes place when your focus is totally outside yourself, invariably. When your focus is on the event, on the other actor, on something other than yourself. You go away. You become so focused on the actor in front of you, on the job your character has to play, that you go away. That's when it happens. It's forgetting yourself, forgetting about yourself. The minute you forget about yourself, boom, this thing happens and you find yourself totally. It seems to be a constant thing when that happens. Well, I was not intuitive enough or smart enough to make that equation in life, but after it happened, I would say, oh yeah, it's just like acting. Life is just like, when life is good, it's just like acting. I'd say. For years and years and years, my gauge of how good life was if it compared favorably to acting. It's only recently that's started to stop. Okay, I'm on the tennis court. I'm with this guy. So I said, well, I got to apply some of my acting technique to this game now. I said, how can I do it? I said, what can I do to take my mind off myself and put it where it ultimately belongs? I said, I know what I do. The easiest thing to do is play for him, play for my friend. I said, I'm going to give this defeat, I'm going to make a gift of this defeat to my friend. I'm going to make it a magnificent defeat. I'm going to let him kill me. I'm going to let him destroy me like he's never destroyed me before. And I'm just going to try and get the ball back so he has a way to, if I can get near it, so that he can humiliate me and destroy me. I set that out as my goal. I'm going to make it a good time for my friend so he kills me. I became unbeatable. I became absent in just trying to get near enough to the ball so I could get it back to him so he could kill it. I became absolutely unbeatable. And in an hour and 20 minutes, he didn't win 1 point. And after an hour and 20 minutes, I got so terrified that I threw my back out. And he was shaking and white, and we never played again. I never played tennis again. No, I did play tennis again. But I started saying, this can work in life. Now, what has happened to me, I don't know if this is ultimately interesting to anybody, but it's crucial to me, so I think it's got to be crucial to somebody, or important anyway. What started happening as a result of this was acting started becoming less important. And that terrified me, because the crucial nature of it was what made, I thought, my acting as good as it was. The fact that it was always life and death. And I'd find performances not being life and death. I'd find myself examining a tablecloth sometimes, excuse me, on stage. Is this water for me? Oh, yeah, great. And I'd say to myself, my God, I'm falling apart. I'm not interested in what's going on. I don't have that edge. I don't have that life and death Dustin Hoffman thing anymore. What's wrong with me? I said, my acting is no good anymore. And then I started examining the acting I loved the most, revered, and I realized that the acting I loved the most didn't have that. And I was starting to slowly become, in being a better person and broadening my sense and my perspective, and in recognizing that there were other things besides acting, and recognizing it wasn't life and death, I could still emulate it, I can still do it, but it no longer became the be-all and end-all of my existence. And what I had to ultimately then trust was the people around me who I love, who are critical of me when they need to be, who say my work has gotten better, that it's gotten richer, that instead of it being this constant edge of hysteria, that there's now something that people can feed off from it, because there is not just an actor there doing good acting, but there is a person there from whom you can maybe garner something. I'm completely unaware of it. I hope it's true. I can only trust that that's what I'm becoming, because that's what I dearly want to become. It's not enough to be interesting as an actor. I finally end up being able to say and think and say out loud. It's not enough to be interesting. You must feed people. We must all feed people. We must all serve people something. Not just entertainment, not, gee, you were terrific, I thought you were great, oh God, you look good. But feeding. You can see it in people's eyes when they look at you afterwards, whether you've fed them something or not, whether you've given them a gift of a human being or demonstrated how smart you are and how intelligent you are and how clever you are. That's nothing. That's not a gift of any kind. We get confused, we get sidetracked as students, as an audience, because we very often think the most intense thing we're looking at is the best. The thing that is most riveting, we think often is the best. It's not. It's the most riveting. It's the most intense. It doesn't make it necessarily the best. This is not, it sounds like I'm making a cry for what I'm becoming. It's not. When you go into a room and there were 4 raving maniacs in there and 1 sane person, who are you going to watch? Who are you going to watch? You're going to watch the people who are dangerous. Our greatest stars tend to be the people who are the most dangerous. Now, you may not see it, but 5 years, 10 years go by, you say, oh my God, so-and-so committed suicide. Why did they do that? It was so great. They had such everything going for them. So-and-so had a rotten life. They ended up being married sick. Why? They had everything going. So they beat their kids. Yeah, they're the most riveting. They're the most interesting because they're the most at war with themselves. They're the most at odds with themselves. But what are they teaching you? What are they giving you? Art, acting, painting, music, literature, it's all got to feed you something in order to be really worth something. It's not enough that it gives you food to be able to talk to your friends about, you know what he did in this G minor 7th there in the 16th movement? That was great. To understand it and to show off about it is not what it's about. Beethoven has no meaning whatsoever as a great composer unless he changes your life. That's the only reason he has any meaning at all. If he doesn't change your life, his life had no meaning. Unless you listen to Beethoven and the heroism inherent in Beethoven that he speaks of and knows, there's no question. You cannot listen to Beethoven and not know fully that he knows what heroism is about, a certain kind of heroism. You cannot be caught up in Beethoven's music fully and not be changed by it while you're listening to it. It's not good enough. In order for Beethoven really to have meaning in your life, really to be important, you have to take that way you feel when you're listening to Beethoven and take it away with you and live that way. Live that way. Then Beethoven is a genius. What he did to specific chords and modulations and the fact that he brought a new kind of music to the world is of no real importance. It doesn't matter. It only matters how he affects you, how he changes you, how you grow from listening to him. All those other things are secondary, tertiary to the fact of his being able to change us. Mozart. You listen to Mozart and you hear a way to live. There is a way to live without strain. There is a way to live without agony. There's a way to live without torture. Maybe he didn't know it himself in his life, but he knew it somewhere and could communicate it through his music. Somewhere in his soul's life, he knew it. That's the value of Mozart. Not the fact that he could write him. Yes, it was nice that he could write a melody that spun out for 7 minutes. It was nice and it was great, but his value to us is not that. That was a value to him, maybe. It's of no value to us. The value in Mozart is the fact that he teaches us to make a dance out of life, to make a joyous experience out of life. And I finally came to the point, I said, yeah, that's even if it means maybe never getting any attention anymore, nobody really putting me in that front position anymore, maybe not being a star anymore. And it was painful to come to that, still painful a lot of times. I want to be that kind of actor that can feed people, that can feed people from a life experience. And it's not ever, it has not been to the detriment of my career, and certainly not to the detriment of my life. And I feel as if that this is a very high level. We get caught up in things. We all do. We get caught up in careers and sports and watching rock video and this. It must feed us, and we must feed other people more continuously through it. It's the kind of life I want to insist for myself, and I hope that you all see some value in and recognize that thing you're devoted to, yes, as being special, but being a gift that you have given to the thing you love. You brought it to it. It doesn't bring it to you. People can bring you love. Things can't. Professions can't. There's nothing inherent, endemic in a profession that engenders love in us. It's what we bring to it that makes us love it. As my son, my middle son, went into law because of reading about Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird. He read it when he was very young. He was very bright, very smart. He recently quit the law because he felt nothing but pain from it. I'm not positive he did the right thing, but he quit the law, and he said, I wish somebody had told me when I was 8 or 9 years old that the thing I loved about Atticus Finch was not that he was a great lawyer, but that he was a great human being. He missed that point. We bring our greatness to our crafts more often than we do it to our lives, but it can be done. If you just make that little transfer and start looking at your life in terms of your craft. The people I know who have had the courage to do that have ended up being infinitely happy, and it doesn't mean sacrificing anything of your craft. It doesn't mean that at all, ever. It means enriching it to an enormous degree. I know this is probably not why a lot of you came here. You wanted, a lot of people like to hear anecdotes about Audrey Hepburn and things like that, which we can now do if you like to talk for a while. That's basically what I came here to tell you. I'll be happy to answer any and all questions now, unless they're embarrassing. Thank you. Is there any way of turning lights on a little bit so I can see people? Is that possible? Yeah? Great. I'd love to see faces. If any of this is unclear or sounds even specious or stupid, please feel free to say so, and we can have a fist fight up here. No. Yeah. Yeah. Escape from Sobibor.
Yes, thank you. I've been thinking a lot about your performance, which I thought was had to extent riveting in a way, but I thought a lot about it being sudden also. Perhaps what you've just been telling us is what I've been thinking, trying to figure out. It was so real,
Well, thank you. I'm glad you liked it. That was an extraordinary, making it was an extraordinary experience. It bonded the actors together like almost nothing I've ever experienced in my life. We still correspond, a lot of us together. On a day, it's a true story, incidentally. We had the survivor, many of the survivors were there watching us shoot and telling us what was right and what was wrong. It was a devastating and amazing experience. One of the things that the director did, which was, from a dramatic standpoint, which was riveting, was he rehearsed the Nazis apart from the inmates. We never saw the guards and the SS until we were in the camp and they were in uniform. And that was pretty arresting. And it kept us from wanting to have anything to do with them for about 6 or 7 weeks. But on a daily basis, one or another of the actors would just fall apart, just break down. And it was like group therapy. The other actors would just come around them and hang on to them and hold them, and after an hour and a half, they'd be okay. But interestingly enough, it was never during a day when an actor had a big scene. They'd always be caught off guard at some other event, something they couldn't stand, something they couldn't watch. And I thought I'd escaped from it myself. I didn't ever break down until somebody did an interview with me on the last few days of the shoot, and it said, "Have you learned anything from this experience?" And I thought about it. I didn't think I had. I thought I'd heard enough about the Holocaust over the last 40, 50 years. And I said, "Have I learned anything about it?" And out of my mouth, I found myself saying, "Well," I said, I think I've learned that I don't ever want to harm another thing on the face." And as I did, I just, I fell apart on camera. I couldn't get through the sentence or the interview. That character was a real man, and I spent a lot of time talking about the inmates of the camp as to what he was like. And the most graphic description I got from him was from a lovely woman named Esther Robb, who said that my character, I forget his name, anyway, my character was the kind of man who thought 10 times and spoke once. That he was like he was the people everybody came to when they were in pain or trouble. And I felt like what I had to do then was just make myself available. And that's all I tried to do with the character, was just to not get killed, and which meant keeping a low profile, but to make myself available to whoever needed me. That was the only thing my mind was on. And I'm glad you liked it. Thank you. I can't see hands, so please just, yeah.
Typically, if you research your roles, I know a lot of actors will research something, a lot of actors will just go in and do it. They don't want to research it to save them distractions from what they're going to do.
Yeah, sometimes, it depends on what gets my juices flowing as to how much the question was, how much researching do I do? It depends on what gets my juices flowing. I believe there's truth and I believe there's reality. I sometimes think that dramatic truth can be more important than the moment-to-moment. This looks better than I initially thought. I mean, there are realities as there are in any business. I mean, I won't do things that I consider degenerate or immoral or against what I believe under my philosophical beliefs. I won't do things like that. I mean, I won't take opposing views to what I believe is important in life. But I end up on occasion doing things that I feel are like harmless pap. Got to make a living. A lot of actors like to pretend that they have career planning. It's a lot of crap. There's no actor on the face that in this country can plan their career. They can't do it. When you reach the point where you're like Dustin Hoffman or Barbra Streisand or these people, yeah, they pick and choose, but they pick and choose the kind of roles that they think their audience are going to want to see them do. They take chances, but they're within a certain framework. They don't jump out of that framework or the movies don't sell. Look what happened to poor Stallone. Stallone, I think, is a brilliant actor. I think he's a terrific actor. Every time he tries to step out of that Rambo pavilion, whatever it is, nobody comes to see his movies. So instead of being really brave and saying to hell with it, he's got $50, $60 million, I'll make my own movies for $5 and $6 million and expand my horizons. If he was really brave, that's what he would do. But he's bowing to what he thinks is love from a lot of people. Well, it ain't love. It's a lot of attention, but it's not love.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If a student came to you and said, I want to be a Hollywood actor, actress, and
That's-
how many dues do I have to pay? What would be your answer?
Well, if I heard that phrase, Hollywood actor, I'd be worried right away. Because the implication, I'm sure you know when you're saying, the implication is I want the glitz, I want the attention. I wouldn't have anything to say to that person.
What if they just said actor?
If they want to be an actor, how many dues do you have to pay? There's no way of answering that. Different people have different sets of innate abilities. There's no way of answering that. Some people just start working and never stop. Some people, you look at their work and you say, get out, for God's sakes, get out, you'll never amount to anything. And they hang on doggedly, they're there on time, they learn, they think, they work, and they end up being terrific. I mean, my father and mother-in-law went to school with E.G. Marshall and with Hume Cronin. And they said in school they were both hopeless. They would have, if they'd asked them, they would have said, for God's sakes, get out, you don't belong in this profession. But they doggedly hung on and took criticism. It's crucial, not just for an actor, but if you want to grow, you got to take criticism. I don't mean just from anybody, but from people whose word you trust and admire. You got to say, you can't say, but you don't understand. It was hot. It was hot there. It was hot out there. You can't do that. The lights were, the lights were in my eyes. Can't do that. If there's somebody out there who's had experience that you trust, you got to say, yeah, even if it hurts, even if it's deeply painful. You do that and show up on time and are relatively easy to get along with people, you'll end up having some kind of career. I don't know, who knows what, who knows how far you go. If you want to be a star, I say, God bless you. That's not up to you. That's up to the public. You can be an actor.
Do you have any trouble learning your lines? And what do you do when you forget?
No. That's do I beat my wife, that question. You're implying that I have trouble learning? Well, no, I'm joking. The truth of the matter is, and I will admit that to you, but don't tell us so. I have never had trouble learning my lines, but I've always thought I did. It's only this year that I realized that I don't have any trouble learning my lines. So I've always gone through the agony and torture of the damned to learn my lines, screaming and hitting walls and crying. And I can't learn. Until this year, I finally realized that I was using that as a dodge for a lot of other fears I had about acting. And I was using that as the kind of catch-all for other fears that I didn't want to face. What do you do when you forget your lines? Well, it depends on where you are. If you're on stage, you blame another actor. You look at an actor like this. In a movie, thank God you can say, we're going to have to do this over again. Yes. Hey.
Two-part. Hello?
Yeah, hi.
This is a two-part question. First of all, explain the difference between live performance, live acting, and in the movie. And second of all, bear in mind this question comes from an architecture major. How does the space that you're performing in affect that performance?
It's interesting. Ideally, it shouldn't really, in a sense it does. I saw my oldest son in a play recently, which he was doing. There's a thing that in some actors is instinctive, and in other actors you have to work at. I worked at it. I would come into a room, into a place I had to act, and I just talked to the back walls until I had a sense that I was not just reaching the last people, but that my me, the meanness of me, whatever that was filling that space. I guess that is a kind of an architectural thing in a way. You want to have a sense of filling the space. I think as a good architect, you don't want to have space that's just empty. You want to have it mean something. Isn't that true? That you want to have space that has some purpose to it, not just emptiness. Well, that's the same thing with an actor. You want to have an audience kind of sit back and relax in your technique. Not be awed by it, not fall in love with it, but relax with it so they can pay attention to other things things other than your technique. If an audience is going like this, missing every fifth word or every fourth word, you're going to lose them. They're going to like your performance, but you're going to never knock them out. So I feel like there's a kind of an innate sense of always being slightly larger than the space you're filling. Does that answer your question in any way? I don't know if it does or not.
Okay.
I don't know how else to say it.
What other fears have you had about acting?
That my talent was going to go away. I guess every actor has that. I'll never get another job. I don't know an actor that doesn't think that they're never going to work again after the next job. I remember a story about George C. Scott. A friend of ours was with George C. Scott about 6 weeks after he won the Oscar for Patton. And they heard these screams coming from his study. And they ran into the study to see what was wrong. And he said, "I got a job, I got a job." So it's, in a way, it's terrible. I mean, it's a horrifying way to live in a sense. But in a kind of way, it gets you adjusted to a reality that we all face, but nobody knows they face. That actors live in a moment-to-moment basis of not knowing what the future is going to be. We all live there, but most of us like to pretend that we don't. We like to, oh, I got tenure, everything's going to be fine. Well, isn't that true? I mean, like, we like to live in the security of the next 50 years, but there is no such thing. That's something that an actor, that's one thing an actor doesn't worry about. That's why actors always eat a lot. Actors always eat a lot. May not have breakfast tomorrow. There's stuff in the icebox. It may be gone.
You said as a director that you were very hard on your cast. In what way?
I'm tough on my cast. I'm not cruel to them, I don't think. I don't think I've ever been cruel to an actor. I'm demanding. I'm enormously demanding. I don't direct a play unless I have a very specific idea of what I want the event to be. But I feel like that's really should be true of any leader. I think any leader should have a very clear idea of what an event should be able to express it to the people who are working under him, and then if somebody comes along with a better idea that can fit into the main framework, to accept it, and if it's even better than the framework, then change the framework. I feel like I'm flexible in that extent, but if an actor is foundering or not working with other people, it's crucial to me that an actor be able to get along with other people, number one, and be flexible. When I audition actors, I want to see not only that he can do exactly some semblance of what I want, but I also want to see that if I throw him a curve, he's going to at least try it. And then I want to see the look in his eye. I want to see the look in his eye afterwards that tells me he knows it was a curve and knows it wasn't right. I want to know that his instincts are in tune with mine. I can't hire somebody just because they're good. I want to hire somebody that's on the same wavelength that I am and that wants the same thing from the event and maybe has vaguely the same idea about what the theater should be. That it should be joyous, that it should be, I want to somewhere see a twinkle in somebody's eye. Like Diane Wiest. You know Diane Wiest's work? No matter how serious she is, she's always enjoying how serious she's being. I just worked with her. She's just wonderful to work with. She's just great to work with. Yes?
Most creative people have an experience in which they do work that they really enjoy, and they put their heart into it, and it means a lot to them, and it gets a polite round of applause. And then they go and do what you call pap work, and sometimes that gets the most reaction of anything they've ever done, and they can't understand why.
Right.
And how have you reconciled yourself to that kind of feeling, or have you ever had it?
Well, there's a horrible thing that H.L. Mencken, did everybody hear the question? Could you come up and say it? It's so long I can't repeat it. Yeah. No, that's tied on. What do I do when I do lousy work and everybody thinks it's great? It's basically, it happens to everybody. Well, everybody's had that experience. There are two parts to the answer. The first part is that very often This is not just for an actor, but for anybody. Sometimes the best things you ever do are the easiest. Sometimes, not just in your work, but in life too. Sometimes you can have the experience. I know everybody here has at least once had the experience of somebody coming up to them and saying, what you did for me 10 years ago changed my life. And they tell you what it was and you don't remember. Very often the most wonderful part of you is something you're completely unconscious of. Well, that's great. I think that's as it should be. The more conscious you get of it, the more self-conscious you get of it, and the less of a gift it is, the less free it is. So sometimes I think my best work is my most effortless. Is stuff that I throw away and don't recognize as being great because I didn't have to strain to get to it. Now, just because I had to strain to get to it makes it valuable for me. I had to climb a mountain. Yeah, when I got to the top, it's great for me, but it doesn't mean that look good to anybody else or meant anything to anybody else. So there's that part of the thing. The other thing is, H.L. Mencken said, and I think unfortunately it's a lot of times true, is that nobody ever went broke underestimating the taste of the American public. It's an awful yet oft true thing. The only movie I ever did, I've made 25 films, the only movie I ever did that made any money was a movie called Freebie and the Bean, which I hated doing. I thought it was violent garbage, and I hated doing it. I was broke. And what? My favorite movie. I don't have one. There's a lot I like. Maybe I'm easy on myself, but there was a lot of films I liked. A lot I hated and a lot I liked. Yeah. You said creative. You talked about creative people. This is something I like very much to say. My parents used to revere creative people. People who could sing, dance. They were revered. They'd come over to the house and they'd leave crap everywhere and they'd get away with murder. And I wanted to be like, hey, I want to be creative. Be an artist. I'm going to be an artist. Anything on the face of the earth can be creative. Anything on the face of the earth can be artistic if you do it as a gift, as a loving gift for somebody else. If you decide that you're going to set the table as a loving gift for somebody else, then you're going to find a way of making it beautiful. And when it's beautiful, it's creative and it's art. And somebody's going to say, hey, God, look what you did here. That's beautiful. I always sometimes think, Chaplin, people say he swept the floor. God, what a great artist he was. But what's the difference between him sweeping the floor and me sweeping the floor, or anybody sweeping the floor? It's what he chose to make of it. It's what he chose to do with it. It wasn't endemic to the fact that it was on film. It's what he chose to do with that. Had he chose to sweep the floor that way in a room where nobody saw it, it still would have been great art. It would have been great art. Nobody saw it. There's a tree falling in the woods. What you do lovingly for somebody else becomes great art. It sounds, it's easy for you to say, in Hollywood. But some of my greatest joys have been in finding ways of trying to live that idea away from showbiz.
Now that you've experienced both acting and directing, which do you get the most satisfaction out of?
Which do I get? Well, I think really directing. I think I enjoy directing more because I feel more consciously in service to something when I'm directing. I don't have acting, I started out with a whole bag load of neurotic needs from it. I feel like I've gotten rid of most of them, if not all of them. But I still, excuse me, have this sense of, I don't have a sense of serving much with it. With directing, I feel like at least I'm serving the actor. I can make actors, I can bring actors sometimes to places that they don't know they can go. That makes me very, very happy. When I've done that for an actor, with an actor, that's enormously exciting for me.
Film work is about starts and stops. How do you maintain your focus and stay in character?
That's the work. I mean, you find ways of doing it. I never had any trouble doing that. To me, the orchestrating of it was always the fun. I used to know on the first reading of something, oh yeah, this I want to be big here, low, I like this we can coast here, this can be this. So that's always been the fun part of it for me. I've never had any trouble with that.
You said the way to...
We'll get you next, yeah.
You said the way to become a character for you is to look outside of yourself and concentrate on something outside of
The way to become a character?
The way to be a character. I mean, the way you become a character.
No, you misunderstood me. The question was, the way I became a character was looking outside myself. No, you misunderstood. That was the way I reached that final moment of release. But the way to become a character initially is to experiment with a lot of things until a light goes off. Experiment with a voice, a way of walking, a rhythmic pattern. The script tells you a lot more than most actors want to know. The script has a lot of the information's in the script. And I'll tell you what actors don't do, which I learned from Second City, and every actor I have ever known that was in Second City knows how to do this. Every Second City, every improvisational actor knows how to look at the whole event and see what their part is in the event. How does my part serve this event? What does the event need from me? Most actors I know read the script and say, oh yeah, I got this, oh look, I got this scene here. And then they have the director telling them endlessly for the next 3 weeks, no, it's a million miles away. Come, you got to do that. And they don't know what the director's talking. They don't read the script. Why was your character put into the script? Why did the director feel he needed your character there? What are the other characters doing? That tells you an enormous amount of what you need to know. And the rest comes out of feeling the rhythm of the dialogue, feeling the emotional mood of the writer. That tells you an enormous amount. And then from then on you start playing with voices, with your emotional life centers. People live in different places in them. Some people, you've seen it. You look at a person, you know that some people live in their neck, some people live in their heart, other people live in their head, other people live in their stomach, other people live in their rear end. You can see it when you look at them. Someone lives in their rear end, they walk. Someone lives in their heart, they tend to be expansive here. Other people live in their neck, they're like that. And that does things to your emotional life when you do that, when you just play that way. You play and play and play, and sooner or later the director says, oh, that's great, I like that one, keep that. That's where the character is. There's no one way that works. You have to be good at anything, you gotta fight. We all go through life looking for the rules that are gonna work every time. None of them, the only one I know is the golden rule. That works, that always works. But within a craft, they're always changing. There are always new things. And that's got to be part of the joy in it. But that's sanding your whole mechanism down so that you become more and more sensitive. You become more and more alive to what's around you, more and more to your craft, more and more alive to other people. Oh my God, today's a new universe. Everything's going to be different today. All the things I said, yes, this is what life is like. Oh, I know now what life is like. If I say this under these circumstances, everything's going to be right. Then the next time you try it, it doesn't work. What's wrong? That rule is... I had these rules for what good acting was for 25 years. Then I saw a French actor that blew me away, violated every one of my rules. And I said, nah, that's good acting, not the other stuff. And then I realized finally that it's all good. It's all good. So if it's rich, if it's alive to other people, if it gives me something, it's a gift. If it's joyous, joyous, joyous.
How does this philosophy translate into your writing?
Into my writing? I'm not really a writer. I've only written a few things, and I've only written them when I had to. I mean, when there were ideas that plagued me that I couldn't get rid of except by writing them down, and then luckily I solved them. I'm not a writer. Somebody asked me once, what's the difference between acting and writing and directing? And the only way I know how to answer that is by saying when it's going badly, they're all very different. When it's going well, they're all exactly the same. It's doing you. Writing is the hardest. Writing is murderous. My wife would disagree because she's a genius. She just hums away and writes great things. For me, I rip up reams of paper. I mean, like would be the decrement of the forestry, of the conservation people, because I rip up reams of paper, gnash my teeth. And, I have no method. I don't have a way of doing it, which is why I'm not a writer. I have a way of acting. A couple more questions.
There's a lot of discussion today about censorship, particularly in the arts.
Censorship.
How do you feel about that?
I don't know how I feel about it. I don't know how I feel about it. I wish I had an answer. I mean, I keep wanting to have one. I don't have one. I get afraid of extremes in either direction. That's all I know. I don't want to see. I don't like what's his name, Mapplethorpe. I don't want to see his stuff. I don't want them on my walls. I don't want to have to look at them. But I don't want somebody else telling me that I'm not going to look at them either. I don't want to look at them. I don't want to be told I can't. Everybody talks to me about freedom all the time, but one of the things I'm starting to sense is that the more that's allowed, the more happens. Everything's happening now. Everything you can, in your wildest dreams that you can imagine, is taking place, and that scares me. I feel like I don't know.
What projects are you working on now?
I'm in the middle. I have had the best year I've ever had. I mean, the craziness of this business. There have been 10 years when I've only done 2 films. I've turned down some absolute garbage, but nothing I really cared about. In 10 years, I've had 2 films I cared about, and scrambled for work in many different ways and other ways. And this year, for no reason that I understand, I'm on my 4th film this year, and each one of them is something that I think is going to be kind of exciting. I did a thing called Coupe de Ville the beginning of the year. I did, a couple of people saw it. It didn't do well in the theaters, but people seem to be enjoying it on videotape. I did a thing called Havana in the Dominican Republic with Robert Redford and Sidney Pollack, which will be out Christmas. Then I did Edward Scissorhands with Johnny Depp, who's a terrific actor. I had a lot of, I guess I had a little chip on my shoulder when I met him because I thought he was going to be a hotshot TV actor, but he's wonderful and a terrific person. And